Hello, everybody. Peter Maravellis here. Hope this finds you all safe and well. Welcome to City Lights Live, the virtual reading series that continues in the footsteps of our in-store calendar during the time of the pandemic. We are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral grounds of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, from where we continue to celebrate the works of authors we know and love with readings, discussions, and forums moving into the fall season and beyond. So tonight, we are thrilled to have with us two exceptional poets, both with new books out. We welcome back into the house C.A. Conrad, and joining them will be Sawako Nakayasu. You are in for a real treat. Our event is being brought to you in conjunction with our friends over at Wave Books. Wave is an independent poetry press based in Seattle, Washington, dedicated to publishing exceptional contemporary poetry, poetry in translation, and writing by poets. The press was founded in 2005, merging with the established publisher Verse Press. How many of you remember Verse Press? Some pretty cool books coming from there. They have generated a solid reputation, publishing strong, innovative work in very, very finely crafted editions. And the books we're celebrating tonight are really, you just got to pick them up. I mean, they're such eye candy. Just the paper, the fonts used. I mean, they put such an attention to detail. So, you know, it's a real pleasure. Just, you know, when we open up a box that's got like new Wave book releases, it's like Christmas. We're just, you know, so much fun. So we're happy to be celebrating two newly published Wave books, as I mentioned. So C.A. Conrad's book is called Amanda Paradise, Resurrect Instinct Vibration. And there it is, and a lovely book it is. And Sawako Nakayasu's book is titled Some Girls Walk Into the Country They Are From. So C.A. Conrad is the award-winning author of several fine editions of poetry. Their published works include While Standing in Line for Death, Eco-Deviance, and the Book of Frank, which has been published into 9 different languages. They are also the recipient of a Lambda Literary Award, a Believer Magazine Book Award, and a Pew Fellowship. C.A. Conrad has taught at Columbia University in New York City and the Sandberg Art Institute in Amsterdam. So coming up first tonight, we have Sawako Nakayasu, who is an artist working with language performance and translation separately and in various combinations. She has worked around the world, spending her time between the US, Japan, France, and China. Her books include Pink Waves, The Ants, and the translation of the collected poems of Chika Sagawa, as well as the book Mouth, Eats Color, Sagawa Chika Translations, Anti-Translations, and Originals, which is forthcoming from Wave Books, a multilingual work of both original and translated poetry. So Ms. Nakayasu is co-editor with Eric Saland of an anthology of 20th century Japanese poetry, forthcoming from New Directions. She teaches at Brown University. Welcome to City Lights Live.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks so much for hosting us tonight. Thanks, CA. Thanks to Wave Books for putting out our books. It's such a pleasure to work with you. And thanks to all of you for coming. So CA and I will be doing 2 rounds of 10 minutes each. So I'll read, CA reads, I'll come back, and we'll finish with CA. I will go ahead and begin. I'm going to read off of my screen and read from my book called Some Girls Walk Into the Country They Are From. I wrote this book beginning in 2017, around the time that I was returning to this country, which is the country that I'm kind of from, a complicated from. This is the first poem in the book, Girls Rolling Themselves. There is a symptom in the proposition when that abundance gangs up, head cocks to the heat, bending towards both livable and untenable. The exit grows and grows forgetful of its nature as orifice. Hand slackens in relation, a wrestle of train car, company, one day as if any other day, or night. Send me there off. Something uncanny about these girls, something believing and barely visible. I din in vain, breath too full. Persist, hinder, say too much, as if it were Vegas. Some get the stars shaken off of them. Some are given rose scent. Some are fed animal protein to fatten them up for the flood. When they emerge, they are 10 new girls, A through J. Okay, next one is called 10 Girls in a Bag of Potato Chips. Fight over who gets which chip, as if there were no more than 10 chips in the bag. There are more than 10 chips in the bag. Girl A assumes that the bigger, the rounder, the better. Girl G believes that the beautiful ones should choose first. Girl C makes a bid for lung capacity. Girl J sees that the sharp edges of the less round, more imperfect chip might come in handy one day. She remains quiet. Girl I says no. Only girl H takes note of the fact that the crispness of the chips is proof positive that the container, I mean the bag that they reside in, is airtight. Only girl H has a feeling for her true position within the global economy and food supply chain and how it affects the likely outcome of their collective fate. She has trouble deciding whether to speak, slap, or remain silent. These poems I'm reading tonight are a little bit on the dark side. I think that's the mood I'm in. So sorry if I'm a downer. It won't be so bad all the way. But this one's a little bit dark too. Maybe not. Yeah, well, you decide. Girl D and her phosphorus eyes. Do not make eye contact with girl D and her phosphorus eyes. Moreover, avoid receiving extended gazes from the phosphorus eyes of girl D. They did not teach you about girl D and her phosphorus eyes in school, not even on the day you were sick. There is no teachable moment. Just stay away. The only way you could possibly beat the system is if girl D falls in love with you. But for girl D to fall in love with you, you must risk the consequences of girl D looking at you with her phosphorus eyes, and worse yet, making eye contact with girl D and her phosphorus eyes. And this is exactly how most people die, and why no one has yet to have had girl D fall in love with them. It is just like that. A small amount of water is thrown into the space between girl E and what used to be girl E. Many years of girl E loiter inside the body of girl E, here on the right. Facing her on the left, inside what used to be girl E, are a few years less than that. A few pieces of candy are thrown into the space between them. Nothing happens. An arm enters the frame and offers an ice cream cone. Girl E wonders about the flavor, but nothing happens. What used to be girl E starts to thin. Girl E reaches for food, though nothing is resolved. When half of girl E starts to die, she looks hard at what used to be girl E for answers. A small amount of water is thrown into the space between girl E and what used to be girl E. The space was difficult to demarcate via candy, ice cream, or weight loss, but the water revives the colors. The surface tension connects the two bodies, and the movement of the water as it is thrown into the air and comes down and hits both girls also serves to let off steam. Now both girls can stop holding their breaths, even though the intensity of their problems is likely to persist for a while yet. And one more from this book. I'm going to read a slightly longer piece. It's long for a short poem, short for a story. Maybe it's flash, somewhere in between. It's called Board Game. I read this, it was inspired by a Facebook post from Layli Long Soldier, who was talking about a scab and how it was functioning in her life. And her scab inspired this poem called Board Game. Who is ready to begin this round? Only girl I, who was lucky enough to have her scab fall off just this morning. It's still a little soft, but anyway, she's the one who gets to go first. Gets to go first. An elbow scab is not as big as a knee scab, but is good enough to get her firmly on the board. Until the others arrive, she has free rein on this board of dead blood. And by the time she leaves it, her detached scab will have hardened quite nicely. Girls A through J, with the exception of girl I, all sit Taiso style around the perimeter of the board. The game moves ahead without them, as each girl waits for her scab to fall off so that she might have a piece with which to play. There's a palpable friction in the air between those who bled specifically for this purpose and those whose injuries were of natural causes. Also, for those whose scabs are soon to fall off and those whose wounds are so fresh that they are bound to be here for a long time. They are the ones who have brought their own food, sleeping bags, and sanitary products, lest they lose their spot or be caught elsewhere at the fateful moment when the scab comes off. There are always maybe one or two girls who have had their wounds professionally inflicted, so as to produce the largest scabs that will fall off in the briefest amount of time. Although these practices are universally frowned upon, such participants are too busy staring at their attenuated injuries to take any heed or reflect upon their misdeeds. Sometimes there is a lull in the activity, and an old, gentle man arrives quietly with the breeze. He carries an old-fashioned epidermis knife and asks with his eyes if anyone would like some assistance. He hums a tune. He sounds like an ice cream truck. It sounds familiar. Over time, most of the girls make it onto the board, though by the time girl E finally makes her way there, girl I and girl A are already on their second scabs. Girl B explains exactly how things work around here to girl E. Whenever a girl manages to get a scab all the way to the goal, it is a small win. The scab piece is removed from the board and thrown into a nearby pool, in fact, right next to the site of the board game. This game has been going on for quite a number of years, and the pool is filling up with the used, dead scabs of girls. Over time, each girl will get her turn to swim in the pool of discarded scabs. According to legend, the experience is quite various. Some find themselves crying at the collected sufferings of girls, while others find it liberating to recall all that they have been through as they reach the other side. Those with sensitive skin feel pricked by the jagged edges of the hard, dry scabs, whereas others find it easy enough to breaststroke their way through it all, as that is the recommended stroke for girls swimming through a pool of scabs. Okay, over to you, CA.
Thank you, Sawako. Oh my God, that was beautiful. The first time I read the poems from that book of yours, that new book of yours, was in a chapbook. And I just was in love with them. They were so amazing. I just love hearing you read from them.
Thank
This
you.
is my first time hearing you read from these materials.
Oh, wow.
So good.
Well, let's get on with your reading.
Well, I'm really happy to be here with you. And I just loved your reading, and I love your books. I'm happy we're celebrating together. The lighting in this place is a little, as it gets darker, I'm going to sort of disappear, but it doesn't matter because I'm sharing the screen anyway. You're not going to really be seeing me anyway. I wanted to thank everybody at Wave Books. Heidi is here, and Catherine, and everybody else. It's just amazing to have people take good care of your work. You know what I mean? It's just not something that, you know, you should ever take for granted. That's for sure. So I'm actually not going to read from this book. I just wanted to talk about how this book, the last book, helped me write this new book. So this book, well, there is a lot to this book. I'm only going to talk about the one ritual, and it's the ritual that involves my boyfriend, Earth, who was, I mean, he was a little older than I am, and he was the chief organizer of ACT UP in Philadelphia in the 80s and 90s. And he's the one who got me to go to ACT UP demonstrations back then. And we managed to get through the AIDS epidemic remaining HIV negative, and it was just astonishing. It was like, we couldn't believe we both are gonna, you know, it was just incredible. But then he was brutally raped, tortured, and covered in gasoline and burned alive in the late 90s, and it just completely destroyed my life. I thought that everything that we had been through already was going to be bad enough, and I don't know. We're good at that, human beings, being like, well, that was really hard, so everything else is going to be nice from now on. What are we thinking? No. How about no? So I was incredibly depressed. It was so depressed. It was the most depressed I'd ever been. I mean, I thought that, I don't know, being a Capricorn, I was pretty good at handling as best as I could friends who were dying all around us of AIDS. And that wasn't easy. But when the violence, and then of course, the violence from the police covering it up was another story. But I'm here to talk about the ritual I did, not the actions of the violent people. And the ritual that I did to cure my depression was through this crystal he gave me the last time I saw him alive. And it worked. I don't want to get into the whole thing. I just want to say that it worked. But I was sitting on the floor of the forest in New Hampshire working with this. And I had an epiphany that this man who I love very dearly, who was, you know, his given name at birth was Mark, but he changed his name to Earth. He wasn't just an AIDS activist, he was also an environmental activist. And it made me think about the fact that he changed his name to the planet Earth at the very time when the planet Earth was being completely overrun by top predator humans, torching, raping, scorching, just torturing the planet and burning it alive. And that's exactly what these men did to him. He left this world in the exact way that we're treating the planet. And when I realized that at that moment, I burst into tears, but it also helped me understand what I wanted to do next, which is this book, the new book, Amanda Paradise. Because he wasn't just an AIDS activist, he was also very concerned about the planet and how we have to keep it safe for everybody to live on. I wanted to focus on extinction. I'm not going to get into everything that I did to build this ritual. I would just briefly explain that I took the field recordings of these extinct creatures on our planet from my lifetime. So I'm in my late 50s now. And in my lifetime, a little over half a century, we've managed to wipe out 70% of the wild creatures on this planet. The world, well, it's not funny at all, actually. I think it's kind of depressing. I know some people think it's funny, but I certainly don't. 70% loss of wild creatures is just really, Yeah, it's hilarious. I see somebody's laughing. 70% loss of the wildlife on the planet is really devastating. And, you know, when a species leaves, they take down all other species around them who depend upon them. And when a species leaves the planet, they take all of their sounds with them. Their heartbeat, their wing flutter, their laughter, their cries, it's all gone. So my idea of ecopoetics is focusing on vibrational absence. Like what happens when the species take all their sounds? What happens to the auditory? Because, you know, we think of sound as just something that we hear, but it's actually not. We're 70% water. Water is restructured by sound, meaning that if the sound is there or not there, we're restructured as living creatures. I think of young children being born right now at this moment. When I was born with a wild organic vibration that was 70% stronger than it is now. These children being born right now are being born on a highly mechanized human planet. This is the dusky seaside sparrow that became extinct in 1988. Every last one of them was wiped out by 1988. One of the things that I did was I would also write on index cards a little line about the creature's name, and a drawing, and I would leave them around the country when I'm driving around the United States, inside of buses or coffee shops, and people would start writing back, and then I would write back to them, and it would become antagonistic once I would tell them that they had helped destroy these animals. This is another thing that I did. I'm not going to get into all of it. I'm going to drop a link in the chat when I'm finished reading, if you're interested in reading about the ritual that I did. It involved, well, it was to honor this. Can you see my picture if I hold this up? I don't know whether you can just see what I'm sharing screen. So this is the first crystal that I ever received as a gift. It was given to me when I was a teenager by a trans woman named Peppy, who taught me how to work with them. She was much older than I was. And she died of AIDS a few years later, but she was so wonderful. I planted these copper bottles with amethyst, carnelian, and rose quartz in Minneapolis, Memphis, Cheyenne. Cheyenne because it's where Peppy, who is Native American, had a sister who lived in Cheyenne and wanted to visit her before they died and didn't make it. So I wanted to honor them. And then I buried a fourth one here in Omaha. This is where I would sit with a compass and align myself with Minneapolis first, eating a little tiny bit of dirt from the Minneapolis location, listening to an ambient recording of the Minneapolis location, and then turn clockwise to Memphis. The Mississippi hits this grid 1, 2, 3 times. And this is right at the mouth of the Mississippi, named after the much fabled ancient city of Memphis, Egypt, which sits at the mouth of the Nile. This was deliberately called that out of that. In fact, there's a gigantic glass pyramid on the shore of Memphis overlooking Arkansas to represent Giza, which is just east of Memphis, Egypt, where the pyramids are in Egypt. And then the Cheyenne. Let me just read. I'm going to read 4 of the poems from the book in this section. And then in my second section, I'll read a few more. So one of the things about writing this material and dealing with all of these extinct creatures, I was feeling very guilty about enjoying the ritual. And it made me realize how guilty I still feel from surviving so many people who died of AIDS. I mean, I lost over half of everybody I loved in the 80s and 90s to AIDS. And so those two things started to braid together. And then the pandemic came while I'm doing this. And then that survivor's guilt just got a little louder in my head, if anything. No one holding it shut. He called me a morbid son of a bitch, and it gave me pause. Wait, sorry. I got distracted because somebody was coming in. No one holding it shut. He called me a morbid son of a bitch. There's this little window that participants can now see or something. Sorry, I'm trying to read this and these little pop-up windows come up and they tell me things. And it gave me pause, enjoying a love song written by a woman who died one day despite her intimate care for the world around her. May our levees hold, may our strength return, a meow avowing a roar. There has been no one since he died who can be there in my chest, lift me into morning, believe in love again. Someone said not to write about love, which is a conversation we can have after I'm finished writing this love poem. Holding a fist of wheat in the wind, a day to be as small as possible, following thoughts to their smells or sit and listen for the archive to waken. The night before moving, I woke, then decided to go back to sleep for one more dream in the apartment where I loved him when he was alive, actually and completely, real flesh with fingers pressing, glow in the dark stars and planets above the bed and turning to smile and join me on the pillow. I'm just realizing now that that's what's going on. Like I have the host thing so they can share the screen. So these people are coming. I have to let them. You probably know what I'm talking about because you probably can't see them coming in. Glitter in my wounds. First, most important, dream our missing friends forward. Burn their reflections into empty chairs. We are less bound by time than the clockmaker fears. This morning, all I want is to follow where the stone angels point. Birdsong lashing me to tears. Heterosexuals need to see our suffering, the violent deaths of our friends and lovers. So no glitter on a queer is not to dazzle, but to unsettle the foundation of this murderous culture. Defiant weeds smashing up through cement. You think Oscar Wilde was funny? Well, darling, I think he was busy distracting straight people so they would not kill him. If you knew how many times I've been told, you're not like my gay best friend who tells me jokes and makes me laugh. No, I sure as fuck am not. I have no room in my life to audition for your pansy mascot. You people can't kill me and think you can kill me again. I met a tree in Amsterdam and stood barefoot beside it for 20 minutes, then left, completely restored. Yet another poem not written by a poet. Sometimes we need one muscle to relax. Long shift at the strip club to say, while standing in line for death, I am fanning my hot pussy with your new book. Will you sign it next week, my fearless faggot sister? So this is memories of why I stopped being a man, and I dedicate it to Jason Dodge, this amazing artist in Berlin, who I love. He's a great man. He's really terrific. And this was recently, I was invited by Angela Cunnett, the curator at the Elizabeth Art Foundation, for this show, Boy Box in New York City, that just came down. And she was very amazing. She took this poem and enlarged it to 6 feet and then printed it on chiffon fabric. And it had it just sort of staying in the gallery, just slowly floating while people would read it. I like that she chose chiffon, considering the topic. I think chiffon can handle all that violence. Cover it up, all those bullets. It's normal if your cock gets hard while you are shooting. My uncle told me on my first deer hunt. Pythagoras knew the music of Jupiter and Mercury long before NASA. But to begin again, no hero itching at the door. The never-ending search for weakness in neighbors, siblings, coworkers, rival football teams. After seeing the open body of muscle and blood, we had horrible ideas about what to do with our lives. Imagine how they gathered around the first cannon ever fired. Sweaty, excited, rock hard. Before he died, Kalashnikov confessed to suffering unbearable nightmares. Surrender your nouns to my verbs, he said, he said, he said, he said. In a game of Russian roulette, I want a pair of glasses that can see the wind. I walk around town each night, watching the slightest breeze approach dry leaves like a premonition. After 1,000,000 years of dreaming, the solution is still the same. Hold me to your bruised song until it warms me right. This is my last poem in this set. 900 chocolate hearts a minute at the candy factory. Estimate number of near misses after interrupting the angel prying your father's jaws apart. Fashioned on the tip of a fork. Car horn a door to the birth canal. Living section of dawn cooking inside the poet. Today is the day we reject this vexing sell-by date worry. No guarantee we will cohere in our broken patch of garden. When you look at me, you see mostly water who will one day hasten to join a cloud. A thing I know for certain is to cook companionship into food, to taste and become fellowship. Eat a leaf with a whole to share nourishment with a future butterfly. You believe in sharing, at least you used to. I know you want to shock me with reports of enjoying glory holes, and I can act shocked to amuse you. Yet I wonder if you ever look up to the wall, thinking it will be his eyes. Thank you.
CA, I love those poems so much. Really, really wonderful. Let's see. I need to catch my breath. Should I just jump in and read some more? Let's see. Thanks again, CA. I feel like I need to give some breathing room around your reading and your stories and everything that you've shared with us tonight and through the book too. I am going to read a little bit from a new book of mine that's called Pink Waves. And I wrote this in the process of moving my way towards an in-between space between poetry and translation, and looking for what existed when they joined up in the making of new writing, which is what translation is anyway. And I came across this idea of micro-translation, is a word I made up to talk about an action of translating one but not all aspects of a text. And so Pink Waves has as a source text a poem by Adam Pendleton called Black Dada. And it also has a different source that is a book called Waveform by Amber DiPietra and Denise Lito. And so I'm borrowing the syntax from Adam Pendleton and working my way through the waves of language in Waveform. And it's in 3 parts. I'm going to read parts of one thing and then move on to a later section. It's one giant poem, so it's hard to find pieces, but you'll hear the recurrences. Pink Waves, Part A. 1. It was a wave all along. 2. It was a wave all along. A passing moment reveals itself to have cued the long apology. 3. It was a wave all along, sliding between the heat of now and surrender. A passing moment reveals itself to have cued the long apology. I sat with a friend and the loss of her child. 4. It was a wave all along. A passing moment reveals itself to have cued the long apology. I sat with a friend and the loss of her child, sliding between the heat of now and surrender. And then somebody holds your wild you closer to the range. The specks of a body don't reveal what it means. So which body do you want to wear today? The extent that we need another dollar. Seven. It was a wave all along. A passing moment reveals itself to have cued the long apology, sliding between the heat of now and surrender. Now I am at odds with myself. She was an elegy function. She happened at once. She pitched the formal struggle of a vertical field of grass, and then somebody holds your wild you. I need the drifting organisms of the space between. I need the slightly eroded quicksand moat to protect us all from impending waves. I need a decidedly animal resolution, cantilevered muscles. When the goals bring the stillness, a new sound erupts as if out of nowhere. Some people just never stop writing. Black data, black data. This is a snap and tether, I assure you. To walk there is to flank the path with impolite noises, lift back ahead, raring with deaf rage, determined to largeness, loudness, a length of time, enough time for all to reach for their Swiss umbrellas. I had a nice dick. The sky is blue. I wanted you to see it, want it. Yes, we are warm. I touch the quiet edges of your body into a spin. I need a very animal claim. It's haptic. It's your membrane. The extent that we need another dollar. Which parts available for naming atop a sharp manicured nail? How are we to define this node? What makes you wave at my cocked head in the pool? What do you want to bang against? Do you think that if I brought you more and more endless blue-green ovals, then far below the surface, you could jam an entire shark following the manatee into your body, and you could translate that into this touch, that blow, and linger in the deep? I want the detached musculature to resist. I need an explanation. What did you bring when they turned the grass to vertical? Hip replacing hip, developing scab. Internal findings move in super slow motion beneath the bedroom window. Seed of control. Imperialist narrator turns the volume up against the position, the principle, the susurration. The goal of stillness is to link up the spectral and the membrane to a higher form of visibility. Uninvited noise is to be held back with steep consequences. We want to make noise. And skip to the last section. Now things are blending and recombining after the middle section happens. I need to center an unsolved problem. I need a constant morning, a kick in my mouth or coffee, a jar of silence for two, body with transparent terms, a slip of concentration in the predicate vicinity. Theodora Walsh has gone away. Magical girls in their colors. Did your hue rearrange? The steady, abiding, deaf gain. Insert arrow. So did I love. The deadline is a space of time. The wrong height takes its position. Line, do your thing. I want to drown, then laugh, blade, then field, self and self, path towards comfort. How will I locate expansiveness in touch? Refuse, snap, we ate them. 8. It was a wave, just the waves, the outer sidewalk on my sleeve. It costs money to get to the bottom of things. Now I am at odds with myself. My feet are tied. I ask you who said what? 2019, 11:50 a.m. Can you hold it, Netup? Do you hear it, Pangyo? Is it hard enough, Eugene? Do you like it? Maya Bjornsson came and left, but left something behind. Do you want more, Kaibigan? Is this the right angle, Van? Is it here, Chingu? Are you breathing, Vrend? Is it you, Arkadash? Does it hold to the bounds of the circumstance? Is it too heavy in light of the actual transgression? What about dinner tonight? Fish or cigarettes for later, or coffee? Fog of ours. Art in institutions, institutions in art. You, night, you. This is what she said. I need you to see it, want it, super slowly and resolutely. 2019, I sit here alone with the fires I love. These are the waves I pursue my better self. Seemingly large beauty or glitter or the dark whip of power. Conceptual artists do not hold hands. They do not have hands, not in that way. Conceptual artists do not march. They do not have feet and legs, not in that way. Conceptual artists do not make faces. They do not have feelings, not in that way. History is a cube in the foreground. I am not a conceptual artist. You, fire, crashing one wave after another. Line, break it, closer to feeling the heat. Kick in the mouth, my mouth. So do I love, I did love. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wow. I love your new poems. That's wonderful. Thank you. And I'm happy to say that that mean person who was in our event earlier is gone. The person who was laughing about any type of violence, any type of mention violence, he would just crack up. He does that every time I see him at an event. I don't know what his problem is, but I'm just glad he's gone. Could I please share the screen again? Peter? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to read a little bit from the last poem in the book, which is 72 sections. I'm just going to read a few of these sections. The idea is that all my poems sort of stand on the bottom of the page, no matter how big they are. So they're like little creatures. For years after friends died of AIDS, they still danced with me in my dreams. Did survivors of the bubonic plague dance with their dead? Who will dance with whom in a year? Let's keep safe dance together in person. I put my face in a small room called a scuba mask. I have carried my room through larger ones. What did I think I would see as everything imploded? After he died, I tried to hold him vibrating in the middle of a poem. Everyone is always explaining how different being alone and lonely, but the next conversation is how we have no choice but to die. M drew his face the day he was diagnosed HIV positive and kept drawing as his face changed. They were sublime, like Munch's self-portrait with Spanish flu. He called on his deathbed at his parents' home to say his father was in the backyard burning the stack of drawings. I wanted to make him stop. Please don't, he said. It's his last chance to deny me. How can I deny him that? My first meal after his death, a decision to persist without him. Please do not attempt to command the common winds. Language shows where we stand. It can reveal how we care about who is listening and how or if we are listening. We cannot even be sick together, wishing karma meant foes against the wall. Mr. President, there is only one body on the planet whose gender you get to identify. After that, it is none of your business. Now, you would think with the current political whatever in Washington right now, you would think that I was talking about Trump. No. In June of this year, President Biden made the decision to have a summit meeting with the top evangelical Christian leaders, and he publicly told them he defends their religious freedom to discriminate. These are the people who are electrocuting young queer kids right now, doing electroshock therapy and conversion therapy. I think the president needs to fucking apologize for going to these scumbags during Pride Month of all times. There are 12 months, but he chose to do it. Anyway, it just made me so angry. I couldn't believe he would. It was such a betrayal after voting for this man. Anyway, I'm pissed. I mean, I'll vote for him again if I have to, I suppose, but I'm not real happy. So this is about a play that I wrote. Own Your Pussy in the Dark was the name of a play I lost with a box of stolen journals. The main character based on my friend Adam, a street hustler who died of AIDS. I miss my friend. I can still see the one typed script in the box. Adam is my Virgil, who guides me to the 18th floor to leap off the balcony, then climb back up, not a single scratch, to leap again and leap again. There is a lot of resurrection and a revirginizer machine and a scene where we tie pine cones to our heads to honor the swollen pineal gland of the goddess. But that is all I remember about Own Your Pussy in the Dark. When I was younger, I wrote this play because there were just so many people dying. And I had just this whole thing of like dying and coming back. And then I lost the play. I think I was meant to lose it and then write about it in this poem, I guess. I don't know. My grandmother Pearl said, "Throw your wallet away the moment you lose your job." There were many excuses for losing jobs where I grew up. She was the only person in my family in the 1980s who asked about my dying lovers and friends. She said to me after a week with 3 funerals, "There was a beginning to this pain. Now you know the middle, but the end too must show itself. When you survive this, love will destroy all doubt." Okay, one more poem from here, and then I'm going to end with a few new poems. We had much to leave behind in order to follow the river to the sea. My grandfather said, always remember you come from people who wash after work. Migration can change a family. Some die before the end, others born along the way. I know my poems by their shapes, and I felt their edges in my dreams, the side of a poem rubbed against my cheek like a bone comb or a lover's toe. Okay, so the reason I want to end with these is because, I started by talking about the ritual in this book that led me to this. And now this new material literally comes right out of it, because dealing with all this extinction, I'm now dealing with animals in a new way. I'm dealing with the ones who have survived top predator human and have learned to adapt with us. And this is a crow who I had a very interesting friendship with recently during lockdown. I would feed this crow on the ledge in Seattle. And then the crow started bringing me gifts. I'm going to post in the chat a link so that you can read about this. I'm not going to explain all this. That way you can read about it if you want all these different gifts. This one right here is in my wallet. I laminated. It's a little piece of gold foil that I dreamed about after the night of the first gift. It didn't look exactly like that, but the crow brought me gold. And then the crow brought me gold, actually brought me gold. It was beautiful. I loved it. Oh, okay. I'm going to read some of these poems. Swallowed each other until we heard each other think. Queer pirates I have loved, loosened my wilderness. No more miscounting butterflies in our utopia. Let's make poems that can rob a bank. Why not? Our little places within are not dungeons, remember, remember. Astronomers point satellites into space. The military points them down at us. The inverse relationship between love we offer and what we give. This on and off button is another opportunity to believe there are only two choices. This too must end. Here we go. It is easy to forget there are other stars when sunlight fills me to the gills. Keeping a toe in the dance, music our preferred epoxy. I do not have enough civic pride for the grift in the system. Get me out of the grime of the sentence. Earning love is like taxing oxygen. How many times are we asked to overthrow our desire? Please say you too are sick of it. A storm of handwriting was this poem's first shape. All that matters is which decisions today lead me closer to you. Do not fall away. 1, 2, 3. A paper boy delivering his father's obituary. A footnote to stumbling in the dark as an art form. Come sing with me into this dough. What song shall we bake into our supper? $0.90 extra for supernatural. I never dreamed talking of empire's collapse would give you such a hard-on. There is tenderness in the way you think the FBI is spying on you. Someone in your imagination cares as you undress in the dark, aware of no spatial absolutes on the calendar's shrinking surface. To desire the world as it is, not as it was. Falling feather attaches to new life. For a moment, when the hammer approached, we thought, is that thing coming this way? We are the fractal drop to hear our own harmonics in the muffled underground hum of seeds. This is the last one. Remember our metal skin when the planet first caught fire? It was years before we understood the awful thing we held to our chest. Whatever a poem can send into the future, please send the breath we have been trying to catch for as long as you can hold it. So glad you came by. Thank you as always. Thank you.
Oh, seeing. Thank you. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
That was amazing. That was really, really powerful.
Oh, would we like a Q&A? If anybody has any questions, hi, Valencia. I see Valencia. Valencia, genau. Somebody asked, how do you manage anger in your work? Well, the idea is that the anger isn't really something, it's like I'm not using it so much as a vehicle as I am using it as a way of expressing exactly how I'm, it's not really a vehicle. It's more of an immediate expression that will come out whenever, especially when I'm writing about friends who were murdered, you know what I mean? Things like that. I don't know. I think anger is something that is a problem right now in this country because so many people think that you're not allowed to be angry or something, and then they get really angry and then they really explode. And I think that you can be healthy and be angry. You know, it's not, and why shouldn't you be angry if people are being murdered who you love? You know what I mean? But yeah, it's hard. The question is, how do you deal with it? And it's easy. It's not easy. You have to change your life. And I did that ritual to do that. How about you, Sawako?
Well, no, I'm still thinking about the anger in your poetry, and I feel the presence and the depth of the anger, and it's very, it's not concealed, it's not repressed, it's not trying to be anything, but it is. And yet there is something really healthy about making space for it and communicating it and owning it and letting people know that you feel angry about things that you are right to feel angry about, that we all should be angry about in many ways. And so I think it's interesting actually as a topic to think about, because I'm angry too. And a lot of my poems came out of things that made me very angry. And they're very different things. Some of them are, they may have things in common, but the poetry for me is a space where I'm allowed to use my anger, and it's useful in sort of a transmission of these responses that would be inappropriate in the actual moment where I felt angry about something. There are some times when I say it, there are some times when I'm direct, but there are other times when I can't be direct. And the fact that I can't be directly angry could even be one of the reasons why I'm angry. But there's space for that in poetry, and there's space to hold that and carry it and use it. So I think it's vastly important in a way for all of us to have a place to put our anger, because we all have things to be angry about.
Yeah. When I was a teenager in Philadelphia, the poet Etheridge Knight was there, and Gillot was also there.
Wow.
And those were two men. And I want to make it very clear, both of these men were heterosexual. Very important for me to point out, because in the 1980s, And in the 1990s, a lot, I mean, it was the straight people who were considerate and kind to queers during the early years of AIDS were very few, very, very few, very few. It was painful how few. Almost all of my straight friends vanished in the late 80s, almost all of them.
Your straight friends vanished?
Oh yeah, they wanted to know because everybody was dying. Oh no, in fact, I wrote an essay for the Poetry Foundation last year that I could put in the chat if anybody wants to read it.
It's incredible.
And the reason I was able to write it is because I ran into that old friend who literally deserted us when our friends were dying. It wasn't at one single funeral. And she told all of our mutual straight friends that I thought I was HIV positive, and all of them vanished. Just vanished. So it was a big deal. But the thing is, why I'm bringing this up is the heterosexual poets. I could count on them always. The poets were real. Etheridge Knight was real. He was like, just give them shit. Because I had all these, when I was 18 and 19, I had all these really angry anti-Ronald Reagan. You have no idea how angry I get when I hear people say nice things about Ronald Reagan. Like, well, he was like no.
Nice things about Reagan.
Oh my God. It just makes my hair catch fire when I hear this revisionist kind of bullshit, you know?
Yeah.
He was a violent, horrible man, period. I've got nothing good to say about Ronald Reagan. And I'm sick of hearing nice things about him.
I'm sorry to be laughing. I don't think about him very much, but I'm just surprised to imagine what nice thing I might possibly say. But I just want to say on the other side of that is that since I came out to you, CA, you send me emails, and almost every email I get from you starts with "Hello, my queer friend," and it's so positive and affirming, and I feel so delighted to be with you in that moment. Every time I get an email from you, it makes me feel very good. Yeah. I
just want to say, I hope you don't mind, since you brought it up, I hope you don't mind me saying this.
No.
In public, but I was very honored by that dinner we had when you brought it up. It was to me and Ann Walpin. And
did I come out to you and Ann at the same time?
Yeah, and it was beautiful, and I was just like, "Wow, it took me a little bit to catch up with what was happening because I worked at the queer bookstore in Philadelphia for 7 years, Giovanni's Room, and I met people I met this woman in her 80s who came out in her 80s, and it was just so wonderful, you know.
It takes a while to get there, or to know it, or to say it, or it's such an interesting ongoing journey. Like, I feel a little bit, I'm a little bit sweaty having brought it up to this group right here, but I've been wanting to say it because I thought of the wave book, Some Girls Walk Into the Country They're From. I felt like I was coming out in that book, but as I'm reading it, I'm like, maybe people can't tell. It's probably not obvious enough. And, it's that feeling of like, it's incremental and it kind of accrues over time. And I think that my friendship with you has been an important part of it.
My friendship with you has been very important, and not just because of you coming out, but for everything. And I'm telling you, the fact that you've come out is huge. It's just like I feel like you're a different person since you come out.
I have been changing persons for a while now. Actually, this morning I've been trying to write a book. I've been trying to write this book for a few years now, but I'm trying to write this book about how I evolved from being straight to queer, and from my own Asian racial orientation being more white-centric to less white-centric. And all of these transformations are all happening at the same time in these layers and kind of swervy ways. And it's been funny trying to articulate what that was, because it was happening all at the same time. But certainly it's the artwork and the poetry that gets there ahead of time. So my work was queer before I knew I was. And it was funny. I came out to you in person because I really wanted to come out to people in person and kind of enjoy being in that moment together. And some of my friends who've known me for years and years, for decades, they're like, I knew that. And it was like, oh, well, you find, like I could tell when you made this performance piece and did this. And not that they were, sort of supplanting my idea of my own identity, but that they saw it in me, that they saw these elements that were already present. So it's just another part of that path.
It's great. It's so, only people who are in the closet, I think, can really appreciate how difficult it is. You know what I mean? And
yeah, and it's strange too. I remember I read at the Poetry Project, and I came out, and in that moment that I came out, I was talking about coming out while being in a straight marriage, being in a cis body, and being queer, and that those things are things I hold together. And then after that, a few people contacted me, and there were these other experimental Asian American poets who were also queer and also in straight marriages. And we have this little group now, and it's very sweet. It's a very, very, very specific demographic of us, but there's something
happy.
specific to that, and it's been interesting. And, I've made new friends as a result. We're not even talking about poetry anymore. I hope that's okay. But it's also, I think, because of the practice of poetry that has helped me get here also. So they're not unrelated. I think so much about your rituals and how integrated they are into the life that you live, the situations and circumstances that we're facing, and that all these things connect. And poetry is one node out of all of these elements. So that really resonates to me so much. Even though I have a very different way of making the poems, it still feels similar in the way that we live our lives as poets.
I agree. And you know what? I want to extend from what you're saying about the writing and also the topic we're talking about and how they're connected. I'm not going to use their name just because it's not like they said anything terrible. I just didn't ask their permission to talk about them. But somebody just the other day was talking to me, and they said, what you do is so brave. I don't know if I could do it. And I was like, look, but here's what you need to understand. Thank you for saying that. However, I feel that it's possible that it was a little easier for me to be creative. And here's why. When I was outed in 1982 in high school, it was a very bad year to be outed. Ronald Reagan, they just started making gay jokes when AIDS would come up at press conferences for Reagan, and everybody in the room would laugh. You need to listen to these. I play these for students. I'm like, it's not just they made jokes. They made jokes because every reporter from the New York Times to the crummiest newspaper in the room thought it was hilarious. So that's why they continued doing it. And meanwhile, 33 million people are now dead. Over 600,000 people died of AIDS in 2020, but you don't hear about it, right? Here's the thing though. When I was outed against my will, I was forced outside of the respectable, acceptable world immediately, like that. My life was just over as I knew it. It was just over. The switch got flipped. And the next day, everybody in my school knew, and everybody in the town knew. And there was no going back. And it was not good. It was kind of brutal. And the good news about that is that when you're forced outside like that, you have an opportunity to either commit suicide or use that as an opportunity to no longer have to participate. And now you get to have your own creative space as much as you want. It's not something that I would encourage because it's a terrible situation, but that gave me the ability to invest myself entirely in poetry. In fact, I ran away as a teenager to become a poet. That's how much I loved it. And, you know, it's just, I have to say that the other reason is to my working class background. A lot of my friends who are poets, they come from doctors and lawyers and engineers and these white collar workers who are always breathing down their necks when they were in college. Like, you got to get a degree, you got to get a master's, you got to get a PhD, you got to succeed, you know. But my family, my factory working family, they didn't give a shit what I was doing, so long as they didn't have to pay my bills. So I was free from all that, like, the parent breathing. It's like the people who come from money have a harder time with their family and parents than the working class people. So I feel like I was given a lot of space that a lot of people don't have.
That's so funny, because for me, it was the sexism of my parents that made them not worry about my having a career, because they just wanted me to marry somebody who was going to have income. And so they never imposed anything in terms of an economic career for me. They said, do whatever you want, just make sure you marry somebody who can take care of you. And that was a freedom. It was a different kind of freedom. I don't necessarily recommend having sexist parents. And sorry for calling you sexist, my parents, but you are. I invited my parents at the last minute, but I don't think they could figure out how to get on the Zoom. And I love them, even though, you know, they're racist and sexist. I still love them. They're my parents, and that's part of what it is. I am so sorry about how brutal it was for you to be forced into coming out like that. That's such an intense story. And to think about just remembering what it means and how hard it is to be that age anyway. And to be in a small town where everybody's going to know instantly. That's huge. But I also did find it interesting how people do often say that it's brave when I come out. And I understand that, and I understand it in the sense that it can be uncomfortable. But I also have to, like, I definitely understand my privilege in being straight seeming and being an invisible queer, and that I can pass otherwise. I can pass as straight very easily. And I think it's very true that I don't have the experience of physical harm and of fear and that kind of exposure to violence that you otherwise could. So I understand, like, so some of my friends who are similarly queer feel a little bit reluctant to own that identity without having lived through the horrific aspects of it. And that's an interesting space that I'm conversing with. And, you know, I think it's better to say I'm queer and increase the numbers, I guess, is my hope.
Well, it's funny you say that, because back when I was a teenager, there were, you know, some of the straight people would come to these meetings that we were having, or like this big queer potluck. There was this couple there, and they were very nice. We loved them, but they would say, "Gosh, what can we do?" And I was so. When I was a teenager, I was just like, "Here's what you can do," you know. And I would say, "You should go home and call your boss and call your family and call all of your friends and come out as queer." And they said, "But we're not queer. We're not queer." And I said, "Who cares?" I said, "The more people who come out as queer, the better it'll be." You know.
I remember you wrote about that somewhere, and I quote you all the time, actually, because I love that story so much.
But
there's still a lot of violence out there.
Well, you know, when I'm in Europe or the UK performing, sometimes people in the audience, because especially when I'm talking about the church, they're like, "Why, you know, the church isn't that bad." And I'm like, "Listen, the church you're dealing with in Europe is different. The church we're dealing with in the United States is something you got rid of centuries ago. The type of witch burning Christians we're dealing with here, the type of Christians that President Biden thought it would be really kind of cool to meet with during Pride Month and tell them how great it is that they're discriminating against queer people." God, I can't believe that man did that.
That's horrible. That's
despicable.
It's horrible.
But here's the good news. The state of Alaska like the end of last year did this
Mhm.
thing. They passed a law outlawing conversion therapy.
They needed
How
to
about
do
that?
that. Ugh,
Isn't that exciting? Because
I
that's
can't
one of the
believe-
states where they were literally pumping electricity into the brains of
Oh my
these young queer
God.
kids.
It's
You know,
just
getting-
astonishing that that was still happening at all.
But it's just so
That's
beautiful.
horrific. Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Oh, it's just
Yeah.
this like, and you know, I heard
Yeah,
on
wow.
NPR the interview of this, I forget her name. She's a dyke who was one of the legislators writing the bill that became a law.
Mhm.
And the death threats she's been getting are just kind of phenomenal.
Oh my God.
But she says, look, they were giving me death threats before this. So it's okay. And
Oh God.
she handled it well, you
I'm
know.
so sorry she has to get death threats for that. And for everything else
know.
she's been getting death threats for. There's so many death threats in this country. I feel like there are more incidents of people getting death threats in this country than any other country I'm familiar with. It's really despicable.
But anyway,
Oh,
there's some beautiful people
There's
doing
some good
some things,
news,
you know?
and they are beautiful, amazing people doing good work.
And we always have to remind
Mm.
ourselves that those of us, we're not the minority in this country. You know what I mean? Those of us who believe in the people who voted for Trump are the minority. Even though 70 million people voted for him last year, we outnumber them.
Mhm.
We must always remember we outnumber them and not be afraid of them, because that's what they just thrive on.
Fear.
Our fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you give me a lot of hope and courage. You always do. It's so nice to see you. Always better to see you in person. Sorry I missed you when you came through Boston.
Oh, I didn't make it to Boston.
Oh, you
That's
didn't?
the problem.
Yeah.
If I'd made
Okay.
it to Boston, I'd have seen it.
Okay. Well, next time.
Yes. Okay.
Hi, Peter.
Thank you. I love you,
Hi.
Sawako, my queer sister.
I love
Thank
you, CA.
So digging this. Thank you both so much. It's
Thanks for
really
having us, Peter.
delightful and such a wonderful selection too of work, and it means a lot. Thank you both.
And thank you,
Peter.
Sawako.
Thanks, CA. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for
Love
coming.
you.
And thank you for joining me. And thank you, everybody, for being here.
Such a great crowd.
Thanks, everyone.